Turkiye. Voice of Turkiye. Voice of Turkiye. This is the Voice of Turkiye.
Martin Andrews, TRT World.
Alexei Muravyev is an associate professor of national security and strategic studies at Curtin University. He says Ukraine's decision to halt the flow of Russian gas through its territory is something that Europe has been preparing for and that the bloc is considering alternative routes.
Countries in Europe, especially those that are landlocked, they don't have maritime access, that would probably suffer more than other countries that can effectively substitute Russia's exports by bringing in LNG gas in tankers, for example, from the United States. Two countries that come to mind is Slovakia and Austria, because 60% of their supplies traditionally have been covered by the Russian exports, and they are the ones obviously that have concerns. But I would imagine it's not a breaking news. It's something that's been in the works. It's something that Europe has been preparing itself for. So I think the Europeans probably considered alternative options on how maneuver energy resources within Europe. It would also depend on the weather conditions and linked to that the consumption of gas and how full the reserves of LNG stockpiles are in Europe. So a mix of factors will come into the equation, including alternative ways of delivery. And your report also suggested the Blue Stream, the Turkish Stream that bypasses Turkey and transits Russian gas into southern Europe.
That's the news for now. My America is up next.
Just close with a couple of things.
The war in Gaza is dividing the world. And while politicians and world leaders wrangle over a solution, a devastating humanitarian crisis persists.
The state of humanitarian aid in Gaza right now is dire, it's deplorable, it's unfathomable.
More aid workers have died in Gaza than any other single crisis. In this episode of My America, we look beyond the politics as we follow the journey of one group of children desperately in need of help.
Today's the Palestinians. Tomorrow it's going to be somebody else.
We visit the heart of Palestinian American life, and we learn about the challenges that U.S. charities say are incomprehensible. Than a year since the war in Gaza began. It is a highly politicized situation that is polarizing the international community. But away from the politics is the humanitarian crisis. And it's a problem that seems to be getting worse. More than 44,000 Palestinians have been killed, and more than 95,500 are injured. Over 2 million are without the basic necessities to survive, including food and water. The United States has spent almost $18 billion on military aid to Israel between October 2023 and October 2024. It's a record amount for any single year. We've been hearing less and less about Gaza in the headlines here in America. It's a controversial issue here. Getting aid to those who need it most seems harder when it comes to Palestine. That may just be a harsh reality. Today, I'm going to the leading U.S. aid agency working in Gaza, and I'll meet the head of the organization here in D.C.
Hi, Nathan. Hey, Sean. How are you?
Good.
Good to meet you.
Thanks for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So when you fly into, or when you go into Gaza, how do you actually get in to fly into Israel? Sean Carroll is the CEO of America Near East Refugee Aid.
The state of humanitarian aid in Gaza right now is dire. It's deplorable. It's unfathomable. I really struggle to understand how it can be this bad. I struggle to understand how we don't have a situation where everyone is trying to do everything they can to make sure that enough aid is coming in, because if people are basically not able to survive, if they're dying from a combination of hunger and malnutrition and disease unnecessarily, innocent people, women and children, that doesn't serve anyone. And I'm shocked at how hard this is and has been for more than 13 months.
What or who is making it difficult to get humanitarian aid into Gaza?
There are lots of factors, but the biggest factor and the root of it all is Israeli restrictions. And as the occupying power under international humanitarian law, the occupying power has a duty, a legal obligation to protect and provide for those under occupation. And Israel controls the borders. They control what goes in.
Sean's charity is one of the only American aid groups still operating inside of Gaza.
All of our staff are displaced, and many of them have been displaced 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 times. And they're living in tents, and they're getting up in the morning and they're straightening up their tent, and then they're going out for the day to deliver aid. Our staff person, Musa Shawa, who was killed, had just gotten home from delivering aid all day long. He still had on his Emirler vest when he was killed during an Israeli bomb.
More than 500 attacks on healthcare workers have been reported in Gaza. Convoys carrying aid are being shot at and denied access. And at least 333 humanitarian aid workers in Gaza have been killed since October 7th.
With the numbers of aid workers that are killed, it gets harder and harder to think that it's just collateral damage. When they have an AI targeting system, a targeting system driven by or aided by artificial intelligence that they call Daddy's Home. And when our Musa Shawa, who is a daddy, was a daddy, got home from delivering aid for the day and was killed in front of his family, and his young son died of his fatal injuries 10 days later, it gets hard. It gets hard to think, no, this is an accident, as they say. And we're not pro-Palestinian, we're not anti-Israeli, we're not pro-Israeli, anti-Palestinian, we're pro-humanity.
The United Nations' latest view of the situation is that Gaza is enduring a humanitarian catastrophe on a level unseen since the Second World War. So I've come to the United Nations in New York, and I'm getting the opportunity to sit down with the Palestinian ambassador to the UN.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking time.
What do you think is most needed to improve the situation in Gaza right now for Palestinians?
Immediate ceasefire, unconditional, sweeping, and sustainable. This is what has been the position of us from the beginning, and we succeeded very quickly in rallying the entire international community around it, and also the Secretary General of the UN from early on the ball game. He called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
What can or what should the UN do to help the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
So therefore the UN is in the business to provide humanitarian assistance and to help the Palestinian people to sustain as normal of life as possible. Israel is attacking a huge war also against the United Nations, because the United Nations is the biggest organization in the whole world that provides help and assistance to the Palestinian people, particularly in the Gaza Strip.
If we're trying to find an solution to the crisis in Gaza, what can the United States do to help that happen?
The United States capable and has all the cards needed to tell the Israeli government, you have to stop this war immediately. A resolution was adopted, 2735, adopted by 14 votes in favor. Nobody voted against it. And since that time, since the adoption of that resolution until now, we are in December, it was adopted in July, we don't see the implementation of that very important resolution, which the Americans did submit to the Security Council, and it was adopted, and it starts with item 1, an immediate ceasefire.
We repeatedly contacted the office of the Israeli ambassador to the UN to request an interview or statement, but didn't get a response. Good to see you. What are we doing? Back in Washington, D.C., Sean Carroll is preparing to go on a humanitarian aid trip to Gaza. He's visiting a local toy store to buy supplies for children there.
We tried for Ramadan to bring a bunch of toys and games in, and they wouldn't let us. And we've been able to bring in some book bags recently with coloring, with reading books and coloring pencils, but it's not easy to get stuff in, so it's taking in a little bit.
What reason do they give for not letting you bring the toys in?
It's not a priority. Food is a priority, and we say, of course, food's a priority, and you can also bring in some toys and games to relieve stress and give people some mental health as well.
So if you arrive and they don't let you bring these toys in, what happens to them?
It's a possibility. We would hopefully be able to give them back to the driver and take them back to our office in Jerusalem or Ramallah and try again next time, but we won't go without putting up a fight about it. pretty excited. That was a lot of fun, I have to say, shopping for toys.
Sean has been made aware of some disturbing news. More aid workers killed in Gaza. So he's making contact with his colleague on the ground.
Yesterday they didn't have good internet connection, not enough to take a call from me. Looks like it might be the same today. I tried a bunch of my colleagues yesterday and none of them could take the call. Sammy? Hey, Sammy. How are you?
I'm fine. What about you?
I'm doing all right. So this morning's news is hard. More Central Kitchen workers. What are you hearing?
Yes, the three employees who work with the WCK, they were driving on Salah ad-Din Road.
Yeah.
And and they have been targeted by drone. We don't know what the reason. We asked about the three people. All of them, they are clean, and they already checked when they signed the contract with the WCK. They checked already, and they don't have any problem. They don't have any relation with de facto. And everyone actually shocked.
So all of them had been vetted, just like we vet all of our staff. They had all been vetted and cleared. They all had a green light.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Tomorrow, Sean leaves for Gaza. But after more news of the death of aid workers, the risks are higher than ever. And there are very few Americans who are still operating in the region.
How you doing, man? How are you? Good. Ready to go?
Ready. This is my stuff.
Yeah, you want some
come back. Come back for the clothes and the.
All right. Cool.
But after more news of the death of aid workers, the risks are higher than ever, and there are very few Americans who are still operating in the region. The time has come for Sean to say goodbye to his family as he leaves for Gaza. Having aid workers killed just days before you're going there as an aid worker yourself, does that give you pause?
Sure, yeah, it gives us pause, but I checked with the group that's going in, and we're going in with a few NERA staff and a couple of partners, and everyone says they still want to go in.
Have a safe flight.
Thanks very much.
Get back safe.
Really appreciate it.
As Sean travels to Gaza, I'm heading to Chicago. Chicago is one of the most diverse cities in America. It's one of the nation's original trade hubs, with railroads, canals, waterways, and a busy meatpacking industry. In the southwest of the city is the area now known as Little Palestine. It's home to more than 85,000 Palestinian Americans. More Palestinian Americans than anywhere else in the country. When you set the politics aside, the real victims of war tend to be women and children. And in Gaza specifically, the vast majority of those affected have been women and children. And the inability to get humanitarian aid into the area is only making that problem worse. I've heard about a charity here in Little Palestine in Chicago called the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, or PCRF. They're the only group in America medically evacuating children from Gaza right now. So I'm going to go meet with them and find out more about their work.
So we identify children who are referred to us. Our team in Gaza then coordinates and asks all of the needed questions to the hospitals and to whatever agencies are operating on the ground. These children are then determined to require medical care outside of Gaza.
Are you able to get out all the kids that need to get out for medical evacuation?
Oh, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's a drop in the ocean. There's, I think, between 12 and 13,000 people in Gaza in total that require urgent medical care outside of Gaza. 2,500 of them are children. No more than 20 to 25 per month are able to leave Gaza now.
Why is it so difficult to get these children out of Gaza?
The difficulty lies with the people that make the decisions, the ultimate decisions, and those are the governmental bodies that are making these decisions. And oftentimes, the answer to a request for medical evacuation is no, without any further reasoning or justification. It should be a simple process. A child injured, his or her life is threatened.
Some of these children have had amputations with no anesthesia.
No anesthesia. We had one young girl who was treated here in the United States and has since returned. Her uncle, who's a physician, amputated her leg on the kitchen table. And she wants to tell the story. As we talk about it now, it's just all coming back to me. As tragic as the situation was at the time, she's reliving it every day and telling her story, which is such strength. It just puts me to shame, not to be able to help more children who have similar stories back.
Do you think that the world knows?
I think the world knows about this. No, the world only sees the success stories. Unfortunately, when we bring 8 or 9 children in, of course it's a success. That's 8 or 9 children saved. But put that into perspective amongst the thousands who we are unable to evacuate. It's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, some of these images that we've been seeing on our television screens are haunting. But we're seeing less and less of those images now. I think people are it's the media, what they choose, of course, to show and not show. And at a certain point of time, people just skip and start scrolling. It becomes normal. And that's something we're fighting very, very, vehemently against. We don't want people to tire. We don't want people to forget. We want people to continue to be angry and shocked at what they see and what they hear. It can't be normal. We just cannot allow this to become normal. Today's the Palestinians. Tomorrow's going to be somebody else.
There are nearly 20,000 children known to be orphaned in Gaza, and many experts believe that number is far higher. The fate of children in Gaza continues to worsen. They are the innocent victims of this war. A breakthrough. We've heard that the evacuation has started for the group of children in Gaza who are being helped by the TRF. They are now in Jordan, waiting to be allowed on a flight to the United States. So I've arranged to meet a local Palestinian American community leader there for dinner. Tell me about this part of Chicago for somebody who's never heard of Little Palestine before.
We have about 95,000 Palestinian Americans here, and they are embedded in every aspect of American life. They're, doctors and lawyers and, engineers, and, they've worked in every aspect of society. Teachers and business owners here, actually right down the street on Harlem, we have some of the most diverse businesses, restaurants and jewelry stores and clothing stores. So it's a very, very diverse area, and it helps to really invigorate the area.
Shadin has done a lot of charity work for Palestinian groups raising money for Gaza, including the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund.
Palestine is part of who we are, and everything that we do, and the food that we eat, and in the songs that we sing, in our weddings, the debkas that we perform, Palestine, in the music that we listen to. Palestine is part of who we are. And so when we saw this active genocide that was happening right in front of our eyes, it really made us feel that we didn't matter, that our lives did not matter.
So the kids that the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund are bringing in from Gaza are flying into Chicago. So we're here at the airport. I'm going to go down to arrivals and see them as they come through.
Doing events for over a year now, trying to help families get out, children get out. I just think that people need to admit that this is a genocide, a calculated attack on children, and if you can help them and be here for them and show support and let them know they're welcome and safe, I think that's very important. Some can't leave with their families, and that's a tough choice to ask children to make, to come to safety and leave your families behind. So I think, it's difficult, and if they'll ever be able to return is another question, since it is not easy to return for them.
My son lives here in Chicago, but he drove down to Carolina, and then we celebrated Thanksgiving, and now we're on our way back to Norway, and we had several hours to burn. Just happened to sit here, and I noticed the Palestinian scarves.
I have been to so many Palestinian demonstrations in Norway, so I said, oh, this is the first time the Palestinian demonstration is coming to me.
According to UNICEF, prior to the Rafah border closure, there was more than 280 plus children that were evacuated per month on average. Post the Rafah border closure, there's been less than 25 children per month evacuated for medical treatment. Many of these children have suffered amputations, some without anesthetic. Rafah is only 2 years old. Both her legs were amputated after her family's home was bombed. Mustafa says that he lives near the sea. He loves swimming, and the backstroke is his favorite. He was walking to a friend's house when the area was bombed, and he lost his leg. That's a bittersweet moment. I'm excited and I'm happy that these 8 children are receiving medical treatment. But one thing that I know is that I have messages, hundreds of messages per week, from desperate mothers and fathers asking me to evacuate their child because they are also wanting to be in this position. And here's the other thing, is that while they're actually happy to see all of us, it's limited. Because later, when it settles down, they will realize that their children are back home, that they have to leave with their family members, and that their family members probably don't even have enough food to last them till the end of the week. This mother has traveled to Chicago with her son for his surgery. She says that she doesn't know how she can accept food here in America, as she has had to leave her younger son back in Gaza, who is starving to death. The children will receive medical aid at hospitals around the U.S. They all hope to travel home once they've received treatment. But what home do they have left? 90% of Gaza's population is displaced. Some have had to move to try to find safety up to 10 times in the past few months. Many have fled while trying to seek medical attention. Hospitals in Gaza repeatedly receive evacuation. We've received an update from Sean Carroll in Gaza, some videos, and a diary of his trip. Now in Gaza City,
stopped unexpectedly by soldiers who made us get out of the van. With several of them pointing at the beacons at us, they interrogated us, asked us what we were doing here at the war zone. I told them it was coordinated.
Sean and his team have distributed thousands of much-needed hygiene kits. Sean tells us that an increase in aid must happen quickly, and more crossings need to open to allow provisions through. So, as world leaders debate and deliberate, as politicians on both sides of the war fail to reach a solution, there is a humanitarian crisis of an exponential level that continues to grow. And over 2 million people, more than half of them children, are in need of basic human rights, including food, clean water, and safety.
These are live pictures from New Orleans where a car has plowed into crowds in a popular street, leaving at least 10 killed and many more injured. Hello and welcome to TRT World, live from Istanbul. I'm Efnan Han, also ahead on the program. Palestinians continue to brave the bitter winter as Israeli forces kill 17 more Palestinians in Gaza on the first day of the new year. Massive show of solidarity for Palestinians. Tens of thousands of people rally in Istanbul calling for an immediate end to the massacres in Gaza. And hopeful Syrians ring in 2025, celebrating a future without the Assad regime for the first time in more than 50 years. We begin this hour in the U.S. city of New Orleans, where a truck has plowed into crowds celebrating in one of its most famous streets. The vehicle is reported to have driven into people at high speed in Bourbon Street. These are live pictures that you're seeing out of New Orleans. Now, the driver is then said to have got out of his vehicle, and he apparently opened fire. Officials have just said that at least 10 people have been killed and around 30 others wounded, including police officers. New Orleans police chief says the driver tried to hit as many people as possible.
We had this event started at about 3:15. It did involve a man driving a pickup truck down Bourbon Street at a very fast pace, and it was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. It was not a DUI situation. This is more complex and more serious based on the information we have right now.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is there's improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on.
For more on this, Craig Boswell joins me live now from Washington, D.C. So, Craig, the FBI special agent there is calling on people to stay clear of the area. What more can you tell us?
Right, and that is a very large area. I've been through that area several times. Canal Street and Bourbon Street all the way to St. Anne is a huge, 8 blocks at least, there in the French Quarter, in the heart of the French Quarter, in the heart of New Orleans. And as you heard from the police chief there and the mayor, intentional act here, not an intoxicated driver. Very strong, forceful language from the mayor coming in, calling this a terrorist event, and then the FBI coming on and kind of backtracking that a little bit because there's different definitions of terrorist events. So this falls kind of into two buckets now, what we know, what we don't know. We know that this suspect now, according to the Associated Press, which just now reported that according to federal law enforcement, Associated Press is reporting that this suspect is dead. This suspect was driving a pickup truck and went around barricades intentionally. You would think these would be large barricades, as we see in these large events here in Washington and in New York and Times Square. They would put dump trucks or pickup trucks or just large trucks in the way. So it drove around, intentionally tried to hit as many people as possible. Obviously, there would be people wall to wall there on Bourbon Street for bringing in 2025, and then opened fire once the car was stopped, and then what happened there will be determined. We do know that 2 police officers were struck. They are now hospitalized. We do know the reports there are at least 10 dead, as you had said, 30 plus injured. That number could go up. You have to imagine the chaos there when you have people packed in wall to wall. These are Canal Street has traffic, but Bourbon Street is closed off to traffic. So you would have to really work to get a pickup truck around this. Now, the reason that's such a large area is that these improvised explosive devices, or potential improvised explosive devices, that local reports are saying that the bomb squad is there and they're detonating these objects, whatever they may be, blowing them up just in case they are in fact IEDs, and so they are looking for potential of other IEDs there that may have been planted or may be found there. So that's an abundance of caution what is taking place there. Now, what we don't know is, what about the suspect? Were there other people helping this suspect? Is this a lone wolf? Is this someone who just woke up and decided to do this? That's not likely the case. There's probably pre-planning. And keep in mind, now, in New Orleans today is a very, very large football game. It's called the Sugar Bowl here in the U.S. It's a huge event at the stadium, at the Super Bowl, just a couple of blocks away. And New Orleans is also hosting the NFL Super Bowl in just a few weeks. So what was the intention of this person to cause chaos and fear in a city where these large events are taking place in a very high-profile event like bringing in New Year's Day? Back to you.
Okay, Craig Boswell live for us there in Washington, D.C. We'll cross back to Craig to get more information on this incident that is taking place in New Orleans. But for now, thank you for that update. A new year is beginning around the world, but for Palestinians in Gaza, the start of 2025 is dawning the same way last year did. On the first day of the new year, at least 30 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes. Israeli attacks have targeted Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza and Jabalia in the north. A child was among those killed. Several others have been wounded. Winter has also brought further suffering. Thousands of people's tents have been flooded in heavy rains during the past few days and nights. The lack of aid deliveries into the enclave continues to worsen the humanitarian crisis, and many have lost hope. Earlier, I spoke to Ashraf Shannon, who's in the southern city of Khan Yunis, and he has more on the latest Israeli attacks.
People here woke up for the first day of the new year with more death, destruction, and woke up to funerals. In Jabalia in northern Gaza, 15 people were killed, including women and children. While in Bureij in central Gaza, a woman and a little girl also were killed in one of those Israeli attacks overnight. This while heavy artillery and tank fire continued to target multiple areas throughout the Gaza Strip. in addition to naval attacks on the coastal areas of Gaza. More than 15,000 people have been killed since the beginning of the war. It's been 15 months, and more than 100,000 wounded, nearly half of them children and women.
Right, and the winter weather isn't making anything easier, Ashraf, as the rain, the constant rain there across the Strip is flooding many tents, making the humanitarian situation worse.
Yes, so Israel killed 45,000, more than 45,000 people, and causing a lot of loss and suffering for Palestinians, and now the cold weather and rain are making people's lives miserable. Normally, before this war, people will be happy to have the rain because they feel it's a blessing. But this time, they feel it's quite the opposite, because thousands of tents have been destroyed, thousands more have been damaged over the last 24 hours due to the heavy rains and the high winds. People have lost almost everything they have. They already lost most of their belongings during the war, but whatever they have left after the displacement, they've lost it to the rain as well.
Right, and I mean, as you're talking there, Ashraf, I can hear the constant buzzing sound from the drones. They're flying above the Gaza Strip. Just give us a sense of how that on its own is having an impact on the people there.
Well, this tone alone from the drones is driving people mad. Even during this war, even before the war, almost around the clock you have this noise, the buzzing from the drones, from fighter jets. But during this war, every time you hear this, you know that either you or someone you know or friends or relatives will be attacked soon by Israeli fighter jets.
So as the Palestinians of Gaza head into 2025, where do things stand? In its latest reports, the UN says Gaza's healthcare system is on the brink of total collapse. Israel has rendered 34 hospitals in Gaza non-functional and forced 80 health centers to shut down entirely. Last Friday, Israel ordered the shutdown of the Kamal Adwan hospital, the largest one in northern Gaza. The whole of Gaza now has only a few partially functioning hospitals and health clinics. Now, the Israeli military has regularly been putting out forced displacement orders for Palestinians as its strikes destroy UN schools and apartment blocks where thousands have been taking shelter. Many displaced families are now living in makeshift tents made of plastic sheets that offer no protection against the freezing winter weather. In the past week, at least 6 babies have died from hypothermia. And since October 7, 2023, 15 months ago, more than 45,500 people in Gaza have been killed by Israeli strikes. 2/3 of the victims are women and children. Well, imagine having 35 of your relatives being killed in a single war. That's the experience of just one Palestinian man, Mohammed Shahada. He's the spokesperson for the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor and is originally from the northern part of the Strip. He says the Gaza he once knew is now gone.
Basically, it's one of the most well-documented and the most live-streamed genocides in human history. You have never had a case where the perpetrators of such a crime against humanity of this enormous magnitude confess daily to the intention to destroy a group in whole or in part, whether it's Israeli politicians like the Prime Minister, Defense Minister and others, or the generals in the field, or the soldiers executing the commands of the political and security establishment in Israel, let alone the videos that Israeli soldiers themselves publish constantly of destroying everything standing in their place, of starving people in mass, of letting hundreds of bodies decompose on the ground and get eaten by cats and dogs, of basically soldiers running over hundreds of Palestinians over their bodies, dead and alive, and crushing them with tanks, turning them into mush. So there has never been such a case of blatant genocidal intent so declared so shamelessly by the perpetrators as this one. I've lived through at least 3 wars, 10 military operations and 2 grand invasions. That's how we measure our age in Gaza. The average Gazan has lived through 5 wars, and I've never seen anything close to this one, not in terms of magnitude, scale, severity. For example, since this genocide started, one question that I ask to everyone is how many relatives you lost. The second is your home still standing? Usually the answer to the first one is in the dozens. It's never below 35. My own family, I lost about 35 members and I stopped counting. That was the case in February. I couldn't cope anymore and keep account of it. Every person that I know, every family member had their homes bombed or burned to the ground or destroyed by soldiers. So basically, there is this systematic effort to wipe out Gaza's ability to host any organized human life in the long-term future. And it's a very grim prospect to reckon with. As a Gazan myself, this full destruction of my universe, that the Gaza that I know is gone by now. And it's not just the destruction of everything, literally. It's also the tormenting of people to the extent of turning them into ghosts, shells of their former selves. So my grandmother made it out of Gaza about a year ago. My mom at the time, she wrote me immediately and said, "You have to come and see her. She's not going to live for long." And ever since she's been incapacitated, I remember her from Gaza as this beautiful, healthy woman. When she came out, she was basically skin and bone. Her legs were swollen in a very frightening way, and she's been bedridden ever since. My cousin Maisa also made it out of Gaza and survived. And I went to Egypt to see her. I couldn't recognize her on the street anymore.
The first day of the new year saw a massive demonstration for Palestine take place here in Istanbul. Large numbers of people came out to protest Israel's policies at a gathering organized by Turkish NGOs. Rupert Stone has more.
A huge crowd packs Istanbul's famous Galata Bridge in support of Palestine. Tens of thousands of people poured onto the city's streets on Wednesday to demonstrate against Israel's assault on Gaza. I'm standing near the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Istanbul, where a large crowd assembled for early morning prayers before marching in large numbers to Galata Bridge. People gathered at historic mosques around Istanbul before converging on the bridge for the main event. The gathering was organised by a group of more than 300 NGOs, led by the Turkiye Youth Foundation.
Israel does not commit this genocide alone. Many countries of the world are partners in this crime against humanity by providing ammunition, financing and political support, or silence. Not only innocent civilians, but also humanity is dying in Gaza, and the mask of the West is falling in Gaza.
The crowds expressed their solidarity with the Palestinians, who continue to suffer from Israel's brutal assault on Gaza.
We are here to show and demonstrate that Palestine is not alone. We are here because this is not just a matter of Islam, but it's a matter of humanity. And because Muslims share a deep sense of brotherhood. Many people abroad are also aware that this is not just an issue for Muslims. They recognize that this is a genocide, and we are here to make our presence known.
Many were angry about Israel's killing of civilians, particularly children, and the humanitarian crisis it had unleashed in Gaza. More than 45,500 Palestinians have been killed in the past 15 months.
Israel is oppressing Palestine. Israel is causing the deaths of children in Gaza due to hunger, thirst and the cold, while the whole world turns a blind eye.
This was the latest in a long line of pro-Palestine events held in Turkey since the start of Israel's assault on Gaza. And given the strength of support for Palestine in Turkey, it will surely not be the last. Rupert Stone, TRT World.
Well, as many countries ushered in 2025 with fireworks and light shows, Syria's capital was also buzzing. Thousands of people flocked to the Umayyad Square looking forward to life after the fall of the Assad regime 3 weeks ago. Some residents shared their hopes for the future.
We hope that in the new year, our status will be better. Peace and security will prevail, and may God support Islam and Muslim, and peace be prevailed in the whole Arab world.
We'll get back to how we were a long time ago, where people loved each other and celebrated together, whether it was Ramadan or Christmas or any other holiday. No restricted areas for anyone. The situation will be much better. I feel it is much better.
Free Syria is very beautiful. Syria is so beautiful when it is happy and green. The green color will be the color for 2025. I hope, as Mahmoud Abdul Hamid, as one of the industrialists and the traders in Damascus and Syria, that Syria will be well, and in the new year in Syria will be strong and free.
Abaida Yito has more from Daraa, Syria, the birthplace of the revolution against the former Assad regime.
Daraa is where people say the Syrian revolution was born. The sparks that actually launched this revolution were here in Daraa at a school where some young boys, they were watching the Arab Spring happen in Tunis, in Tunisia, in Egypt, and other countries around the Middle East. And during that time, I spoke to one of those young boys who's now 30 years old. So when all of this started, he was about 14, 15 years old, and he was telling me that at the corner of his school there was a police point, a security checkpoint next to the school, and those police officers were always bothering the children, treating them badly, even treating the people in the neighborhood badly. And he explained that as they saw all of these things happening in the Arab Spring around the Middle East, they decided themselves they wanted to participate. And this is a young adolescent child, 14, 15 years old. He told me that they actually lit the police position on fire and then wrote on the school wall next to where these police officers were positioned they wanted the fall of the regime. They wrote the word freedom, and they wrote a very famous sentence that your turn has come, O doctor, meaning Bashar al-Assad's turn has come. And following all of that, you see the result of more than a decade of war here in Daraa, and it looks a lot like many other parts of Syria. But here in Daraa specifically, the regime intentionally targeted these civilian areas in the city. In March of 2011, there was a 10-day-long siege, and then towards the end of that siege, there was a large demonstration, a protest at the El Omari Mosque, one of the hallmarks of Daraa, and then over close to around 30 people were killed in that protest at the mosque. And then following that incident, after these boys were taken into jail and then released from jail, some of the boys that went into the jail remained missing, and this protest happened. Then it was just years and years of destruction. The people that I've spoken to here today, even though they recognize the level of destruction here is huge, they're asking about some very basic things. They want to know when electricity is going to come back. They want to know when there's going to be a decent place to go and get medical treatment, and they want to know when they can move on with their lives, when all of this is going to be cleaned up and rebuilt.
Investigators in South Korea have pledged to execute a court-approved arrest warrant for impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol, marking the first time that a sitting president of the country could face arrest. These pictures here from Seoul show supporters of the president camping outside of his residence. They say the warrant is invalid. It was requested after Yoon repeatedly failed to show up for questioning. Yoon, who has been suspended from office, is facing investigation into allegations that he was the leader of an insurrection after he declared martial law in the country in December. Authorities have also warned that anyone who obstructs Yoon's arrest could also be charged.
This is part of the legal wrangling that has been set off with President Yoon's martial law declaration and subsequent impeachment that's now going forward. He has refused, as he mentioned, several summons to search his office, and residents have been refused and been blocked by the Presidential Security Service. In terms of this arrest warrant, which is a little bit different, it was brought by the Corruption Investigation Office of high-level officials in South Korea. It's a court-ordered arrest warrant, giving it a little bit more gravity. Still, it will likely have the same outcome. The Presidential Security Office is likely to rebuff the attempts of investigative officials and prosecutors to serve that warrant. It's highly unlikely that there'll be some type of scuffle or violence breakout if they do try to serve that warrant. So this is part of that legal wrangling that's taking place. And Yoon's lawyers have said, you know, this warrant really is without justification. It's an illegal warrant. That body, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-level officials in South Korea, is not the one to bring the charges that they are seeking to bring, which involve insurrection and abuse of power. So investigators are likely again to be rebuffed, and we'll be moving along to the next sort of phase of the impeachment saga of President Yoon Suk-yeol in South Korea.